Welcome everybody to Digging Deeper. We're a live edition today. My computer shut down and restarted and then got frozen right before we started. So Josh will be running the Q&A today. This is a live version, so feel free to ask questions throughout the entire webinar. If you ask them, Josh will feed them to me and then we'll go to them. Josh, we all good over there? So far, so good. All right, here we go. Today we're going to talk about job boards, and job boards are very relevant to the world of recruiting truck drivers. We have both industry job boards, like a CDL Live type thing, get trucker jobs from us. And then also we have like industry agnostic job boards like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, things like that. So we want to talk about all that stuff, how to write good job listings, what to be careful of, what should your follow-up look like, what should your kind of infrastructure in your team look like if you're going to be able to work these types of leads, and anything you guys ask. So with that, let's begin. First, we want to define the terms. So when we talk about kind of leads in general, what are kind of we said there are basically three types of leads that we can get from a job board type environment. What are the three types of leads that we're looking at here?
Is this mostly driver recruiting space or talent acquisition in general?
100% drivers.
Okay.
Because that's this was a fleet specific invite.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Because my question, or to answer the question, I wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and to be fair, I'm sure people here, which they can tell Josh, if you want to tell Josh, I'm sure, as you know, many fleets also have to recruit technicians and things like that. But
we could plug professional technician as well.
Yeah, professional technician, our own job board. Good point. Oh yeah, we're live. Can't do that now. Anyway, go ahead.
That's a good blooper reel one.
Nothing happened on that one. All right. So anyway, we're defining the terms so that we kind of create an umbrella for everything we talk about going forward. What are kind of our three types of leads? And I want to get into some misconceptions around those, but go ahead.
Yeah, when we were talking about this a little bit internally, make sure you steer me in the right direction. So you've got direct leads, which we would call candidates, people who have specifically raised their hand because of what they've read and are interested in that company.
Yeah, and that singular job.
That's right.
So when they apply, they are specifically saying, I'm applying to this one job.
Well, let me be careful.
Okay.
Not apply. They are saying they're interested.
But it is singular in this specific
That's
job.
Right. A direct candidate. Yeah, I just think depending on who we talk to, our friends at Old Dominion or some of those carriers, they don't really do leads. They don't do short forms.
Right.
So yes, that would be a direct lead. That's a candidate that's interested in, I guess internally we say a one-to-one.
Yep.
Second would be what we call a shared or recommended job lead.
Yep.
And there's some nuance to this. That would be, Indeed does this quite a bit, and we do too. I mean, there's a lot of companies out there that do it.
Yep.
I just think I think a lot of vendors don't do a good job of explaining what their clients are getting. Mm-hmm. So from a recommended job perspective, it's, hey, based off of what you're looking at and what you've, again, not applied for, but what you've submitted or what you've, as a driver, what you've, I hate to use the word applied. What's a better word? Submitted.
Raised your hand.
Shown
interest. Yeah.
Sent your contact info to.
Yeah.
Based off that, here's 4 or 5 other jobs you may be interested in.
Okay.
That's a recommended job.
So that we would call that one to few.
That's right.
Yeah.
So from the driver's perspective, they raise their hand for this one position, but now out of the 5 that have been put in front of them, there may be 2 more that they don't know as much about, but they say, yeah, send my info, tell me more.
Right. Yep.
And then the last one would be what I think in the industry is known as a multi-carrier lead, a network lead.
Yep.
And do we call that shared?
Yeah, shared or matched.
Matched
leads.
Matched lead. Yeah, so those would be, I think they get a bad rap. They're actually a great tool if you use them well. But that's where the driver goes to a job board, puts their information in and says, this is what I'm looking for.
Right.
my experience is this: 2 years. I have hazmat and tanker experience.
Mm-hmm.
I live in North Carolina, and I'm willing to drive regional, whatever that is.
Uh-huh.
And then he or she submits their information, and then says to the company or the website, whoever is looking for that type of driver, give them my info.
Right. And so I remember we've talked in the past, and you use the term multi-carrier lead, and then our multi-carrier application, or however you want to put it.
Yeah.
We've brought that up with carriers before, and then they're like, "Oh, we don't do any of that." And then I've asked you, and you're like, "No, they do a lot of that." So is there misconception about when this is used, or like why do some people actually use these leads but not realize it?
Well, some are telling the truth. They don't do it, and they don't get them. So sometimes that is
That's true. Like the Old Dominion.
Yeah, Old Dominion is a good example. I mean, we've got quite a few that they don't want them and they don't get them. There are a lot of instances where the client thinks they're not getting them, or that's not what we're paying for. But once we do kind of a pipeline review and dig into, sometimes we're not a good fit. So early on, when we're looking at a client or a prospect, we'll ask, hey, let's take a look at what you do. What's your budget? What kind of lead volume are you getting now? How many recruiters? All that kind of blueprinting stuff. You start to see, you got 700 leads, for a $10,000 budget.
Yeah.
That's impossible for it to be a direct lead.
Right.
And again, depending on the transparency, when we do kind of a pipeline review and you see timestamps where 50 leads all hit the system at midnight, like those are coming in batches. Those are multi-carrier apps.
Yeah,
they just don't realize it.
Right. And so I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, or do I? We tend to be we are transparent about, maybe even to a fault, about like, you will know when you're working with us which of these 3 leads you're getting.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, depending on how this conversation goes, we would want to help completely set them up differently.
Yes. And because and we'll talk a little more about how that works, but there seems to be some players in the industry that, and once again, I ain't trying to start nothing here, but there seems to be something in the industry where people are less transparent between delineating on these lead types. And so people will be like, I don't really have any interest in multi-carrier leads, but you're actually getting those. But anyway, so, all right, terms are defined. Let's start. Let's go to kind of what we wanted to talk about next, which was within those terms. If we look at industry specific job boards, or job boards that are built specifically for truck drivers, and then your more broad stroke job boards like Indeed, ZipRecruiter, what are kind of the big differences of those? And then what are the advantages, of using both? Should you be using both? That sort of thing.
Yeah, hopefully, the people who sign up for this, they see value in it. This is more of an education piece. And I will say, you mentioned it earlier, that when you talk about the network leads, the multi-carrier apps, they get a bad rap. But if it's done properly, it is one of the best ways to build a inexpensive pipeline,
right,
in your HR or applicant tracking system, which a client can and should use to re-engage. Which is very low cost.
Right.
So anyway, I know I'm digressing a little bit. Your question was maybe the difference between a
what are the advantages of one versus the other? Like, I'm sure one's not all advantage. You're going to get something from each that you may not get from the other. Just
your agnostic stuff, like an Indeed. I mean, obviously the brand is super well known. They spend a ton of money on ranking in Google. So even if a driver is looking for a job and types in truck driver jobs, Indeed wants to spend thousands of dollars to show up one.
Right.
Which then they click the Indeed listing and then they get served trucking jobs. Not bad at all.
Right.
So I do think there's a piece to that. Obviously, there's some nuance depending on the job itself. Our data shows quite a bit of Indeed or ZipRecruiter in certain campaigns, work really well, and then other ones not so well. depending on your hiring radius and all that whatnot.
Is it like, would you say the more specific you get, the less advantageous it is for an Indeed, or is it?
No, I don't think that's the issue. I think Indeed tends to generate a much better response if it's a localized job.
Okay.
I mean, they're really good at ranking and showing up by city or by zip code, which is also how they set it up on the back end. You buy Indeed postings if you're a trucking company by location.
Yeah.
Or you upload some XML feed, or I guess Indeed no longer takes feeds, but some type of a setup where they're going to scrape jobs. And the way it comes across, it works really well with regional or localized jobs. Anything that's over the road, out 3 weeks, owner operator, unless it's a home daily job, just doesn't work as well.
Okay. So then what are kind of the advantage of going with more industry truck driver only job board?
So again, there's some brand recognition there.
Yep.
The whole page and site is built specific to trucking. Even the form questions are going to be much more specific to trucking than Indeed's a little bit generic.
Yeah.
And Indeed does let you customize some. But there's more filterability. I don't even know if that's a real word.
That's what I was wondering, because it's trucking specific. I imagine you can delineate between driver type, CDL type, all that stuff a lot more.
Yeah, and we've got some great ones out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I think whoever's on this call, there's at least a dozen that come to mind.
Yeah,
and none of them I think are bad. I would say if you buy apps from all 12, there's probably a legitimate overlap.
Yeah.
But if you're in 2 or 3, that's a great, inexpensive way to spend your money.
Okay.
Invest your money, not spend.
All right. What is there anything else you would add on kind of that delineation between the Indeeds versus the Get Trucker job?
I'm sure there is some other ones. I don't know everyone else's, sites. I think we do a real good job of not hammering that database. And what I mean with our industry specific sites, if a driver goes on there, we're pretty careful on how often we're going to push his content out, the ability for them to opt out and not continue to get stuff.
Yeah.
What type of automation they get.
Yeah. So that's one thing I think we could kind of, before we jump to the next point of like how to write better job listings on both the Indeed and then the industry specific environment. One thing we both talked about in preparing for this was when we were talking about like understanding what kind of leads you're getting, one of the best way to probably do that is I always call it undercover candidate. You call it secret shop,
right?
But like go find one of your leads or one of your listings and fill out, like if you're on Indeed or you're on like one of these industry specific ones, find the listing, fill it out as a driver, and then just see who all follows up with you and the time period of it all and what you get in your inbox. I know back in the day with Seth, he had Hank Seeker, and he would show like just it's crazy the amount of people that will follow up with you right afterwards just from submitting one application.
Yeah, that's right. And we use not only your email address, but the text you get, and then even the phone calls, and a lot of it's automated phone calls.
Yeah. And then the other thing about when choosing a partner that I think is very important that you just mentioned is increasingly laws around how information is used and what sort of follow-up you do and who you call versus not call. There's a lot that's somewhat treacherous water to tread. So I know we're real sticklers on that sort of stuff and making sure we're compliant. Make sure whoever you're working with, this is not necessarily a commercial for us, but whoever you're working with, make sure they're compliant in those ways.
Yeah, not all of those sites are created equal.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. All right. So let's kind of move on to, we talked about kind of defining our terms and then like industry specific versus your Indeeds. And then let's talk about on these sites, like we want to talk about how to write a listing that gets noticed, because it's not, you maybe not have as much room for all the flair that you would normally have on, say, like a, advertising directly on some of the, advertising platforms like Google and Meta and things like that. What do we need to know about writing good listings to where you're more likely to get applications or interest forms or whatever?
So there's a lot here, but I will say not only what to write, but also what not to write.
Yeah.
And then from an Indeed's perspective, the way it's visualized for certain sites, and we've had to tweak this on our end sometimes, but the way when a driver fills something out on Indeed, or when they see a listing on Indeed, the terminology or the phrasing is important. And I'm just going to pick a random. You've got all the major fleets like a Martin or JB Hunt or Werner. Any of the big companies, especially anybody that's OTR, the listing could say, hey, XYZ carrier is hiring in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Yeah.
The way that's worded sounds like it's a local job, but that's not true. It's a regional, or it could be an OTR position that includes Tuscaloosa as a location they hire out of. Does this make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
But to the driver, it does look like, because we hear this a lot where maybe a company will say, I get a whole lot of drivers wanting local out of that area. Well, it's the way the ad is worded.
Okay.
And Indeed does that a lot. And we've caught ourselves too, like going to our developers saying, hey, you need to change that. This is an OTR job hiring out of this location.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
But initially it says XYZ carrier is hiring in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. That sounds local, and it's not.
Yep.
And it's not meant to be deceiving, but it does come across that way.
That makes sense.
So I know that's not initially what you asked.
No, but that's good. That's
part of it.
Yep.
I would still say it still resonates with most of the other things that we're going to talk about, whether it's Facebook or Google, and that would be your pay. How often are you home? What does your equipment look like? All those are extremely important.
Yep.
And when we talk about pay, don't put cents per mile, put average weekly.
Yep.
Or some type of an annual pay.
And that's a big one. I hope everyone caught that. Like, when it's important to list your pay in the right way, not just list it up top, but list it in the right way, which was average weekly, not cents per mile.
That's right. But it is going to help you stand out.
Yep.
Is there anything else I could keep going down that rabbit hole. That is a long one as far as how you write your copy.
Yep.
We want to be that partner, but you want somebody that's helps you stand out for those types of multi-carrier shared lead sites.
And I would say, like, AI is great and could help you, and there's optimizers and things like that. I would not say AI is caught up to the experience that a partner, like, not to toot our horn again, AI is not caught up to the experience that we have in writing job descriptions specifically for our job listings, specifically for truck drivers yet.
Yeah. And brand plays such a big part too.
Yep.
That's the other thing is, if it's a multi-carrier site and that driver puts their information in and says, hey, I'm interested in, these fleets, the brand plays a lot to do with that. So if you don't have a great brand, then there's a whole nother conversation to be had on how we can help with the brand and what we can do to help you stand out. But anyway, we probably should do a whole digging deeper on that.
Write that down. All right. Before we go on, we have one last point that we want to talk about here. Josh, all right, no questions yet. Feel free to ask any. Last thing was, so we've kind of talked about, and maybe an aside would say, like, I think this was subversively in there, subtextually in there, maybe a better word, but we didn't outright say it. A lot of this, determining like industry versus non-industry, and like getting recommended jobs versus direct leads versus, like a match lead or a multi-carrier lead, is a lot of it's based off of how your fleet is able and willing to work leads and the team that you have around you. So let's kind of start with direct leads. I don't know if that's a good way to start. So if we're talking about how to follow up, if we're talking about a direct lead, a one-to-one, what's the best way? How do we need to be prepared to follow up with them?
I'll go up the funnel a little farther first.
Okay.
If I'm a recruiter that's coming in, and seasoned recruiters already going to know this, they're absolutely going to work their full applications first.
Okay.
Somebody who's filled out the company application, or someone who's already been approved and is looking to get to orientation this week,
Right.
They're hitting all that first.
Correct.
Underneath that's your full applications from the night before.
Mm-hmm.
And then underneath that would be in our recommendation is the direct leads.
Okay.
Hey, it's 6 or 7 questions. It's not an application, but it is a one-to-one direct. They raise their hand. That's your next one.
Okay.
And then after that, go
Yep.
ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that makes it even more important. Like if you're ranking how we follow up, it makes it that much more important to have transparency about the source of these leads and what it means.
Yeah. And then this is a whole different story too, but looking at the timestamp of when the lead came in, I think gets neglected a lot of times.
Yeah.
If that lead came in at 2 a.m. and you have a, go-getter recruiter that's working as soon as they walk in at 7:30, I wouldn't call that direct lead at 7:30 if it came in at 2:30. So I think that gets missed. So prioritizing your day by timestamp.
Yep.
And then the multi-carrier apps or the recommended jobs that aren't the one-to-one.
Right.
Those would be the ones I work later when I have time. I don't know if you call it filler time, but
yep.
Phones are dead. I've caught up on all my, orientation scheduled drivers. That's when I would follow up with those. And you just have to know as a recruiter that that's a numbers game.
Yep.
You're not going to get 90% of those on the phone the first time you call them, but it is, hey, I'm going to shoot you a text. I'm going to hit you an email. They just need to be worked differently.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit. There's obviously automations, especially ones that we offer, and AI tools that if you're talking about, we talk about like the person that got 7,000 leads for a $10,000 investment. No matter how big their team is, they're not all going to be following up with these leads immediately. There's got to be some system in place that uses more than just callback.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Yeah. And depending on what their applicant tracking system is, where are those leads going? We could give some recommendations, but setting up a separate work list, 10th Street uses work lists, and I'm not sure, not all of them use that same terminology, but and we have a few clients that the inexpensive multi-carrier apps do not drop into a recruiter's active work list. It drops into a whole separate bucket, and some of them, all they do is trigger automation.
Yeah.
So they're basically taking the inexpensive lead, triggering some text or email automation to turn that into a direct lead. So if this makes sense, driver fills out an application for multiple folks, doesn't really know who he or she's applying to.
Correct.
Just gave their information. Goes into the company XYZ carrier's work list, triggers a text and an email saying, hey, we saw you were interested. Here's what we offer. Please give us a call or let us know when's a good time we can reach out.
Yeah.
If that driver says, oh, that's pretty interesting, and then reaches out, now you've taken a multi-carrier app and turned it into a direct lead without ever clogging up the human pipeline.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, once again, while I'm in the habit of tooting horns, we of course now offer Stratus Agent, where
it'll answer it on their behalf.
Yeah, you can just answer it. That you can have kind of the feeling that's very human. It's quite remarkable how well it deals with conversation, and you can just take all of these. If you say, all right, I want when my recruiters first come in the morning, they're going to get those full applications first, and then even full applications from the night before, then maybe next my direct leads, where it maybe not be a full app, but they're straight to me. You could have, the agent could have already almost given you a prioritized list of who you could call back based off of her conversation with all these multi-carrier leads.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And I to me, the biggest caveat or takeaway I'm thinking smaller fleet, 100, 200, 300 truck fleet. And I realize that's not small, but your mega carriers are going to have 50 recruiters.
Right.
And it is a numbers game sometimes. But your smaller fleets, you have to be able to prioritize what's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And if they all come into the same bucket and the team doesn't know the difference, I think it really overall hurts the efforts because they can't work the best ones first.
Yeah.
So to me, it would be just a quick consultation on, hey, is there anything we could do differently and maybe they don't end up buying network leads from us. I do think there's times where they've already got enough leads. They just don't have it set up properly, and we could help them fix maybe some process issues.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're about where we need to be. If there's anything you would want to, if you were to give a summary on kind of the whole thing, and if we have any questions come in, we'll shoot to them. But if you have kind of any, like a big summary of how to get the most out of your job board experience, what would it be?
Whoever they're using, I would at least ask some questions, find out exactly what you're getting, and see if they could make some improvements to it. Are you getting a true one-to-one direct lead?
Yep.
Is it some type of a recommended job where the driver is applying to 5 or 6 at a time? Or is it a multi-carrier app where they are blindly giving their information and that's going out to 50 to 100 carriers? So
right.
I think that would be the big takeaway, is just kind of understanding what you're getting. And if you don't, I mean, we would love to, we can look really quickly and give some help on here's what you're getting and here's the best way to use it. I don't want anybody to think we're going to try to, oh, you shouldn't do that. No, it's not that you shouldn't do it. Here's the best way to take advantage of it.
Yeah. And I was going to sum up that way. I was going to say, look, I mean, obviously I keep being the commercial over here, but we'd love to work with you. And like you said, it's not necessarily just a come by this, our job board versus this one. We're saying, maybe multi-carrier leads are the perfect fit for your fleet. We can help you work those way better without you necessarily adding any budget to your advertising.
That's right.
And so we'd love the opportunity to do that. Love to help you kind of work through that. Maybe we aren't the best fit, but we'd love to help you work through that. Josh, any questions? All right. Well, even if you were too shy to ask a question, you want to email me separately, or you want the recording of this or any of that, please reach out to me, David Arsenal at randallriley.com. Appreciate everyone being here today for digging deeper. And with that, we'll say goodbye.